My sister moved her housewarming party to the day of my son's funeral, called his death a minor event, and our parents sided with her. But they forgot that I own the house where she planned the party, so she's in for a surprise. I never imagined that grief could be paired so callously with betrayal. My name is Danielle, and I'm a 32-year-old single mother whose life has been a constant juggling act between heartache and hope. I've always been the quiet one in our family, the one who toiled in silence, saving every penny to build a future for my beloved son, Jacob. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, pouring passion into my art and dedication into every project, all while trying to secure a stable life for him. For years, I dreamed of celebrating milestones together. I saved diligently for Jacob's education, dreaming of the day he'd embark on his own adventures, but nothing prepared me for the ultimate sting. On the very day we were meant to mourn the loss of my son, a day when I should have been cradled in empathy and sorrow, my own flesh and blood managed to twist the knife even deeper. It was the day of Jacob's funeral. The day was draped in a sorrowful gray, the sky weeping as if in solidarity with my loss. I sat in the small chapel where our family had gathered, the silence punctuated by quiet sniffles and soft hymns. In that moment, every memory of laughter and joy I once shared with Jacob felt like a cruel reminder of what was now irrevocably lost. But then came the unthinkable twist. While I was still reeling from the unimaginable pain, my sister Serena had scheduled her housewarming party on that very day. I later learned that she had even gone so far as to dismiss Jacob's passing as a minor event, and expected everyone, our parents included, to prioritize her celebration over my grief. The final blow was delivered by our parents, who sided with her, treating my sorrow as an inconvenient footnote in their already busy social calendar. Yet fate had one last card to play. Amid the chaos of that heartless day, I received an unexpected inheritance. A formal document revealing that our beloved grandmother, whose unconditional love had once been my refuge, had left her house to me in her will. That house, the very one Serena had chosen as the venue for her party, became my silent weapon, a symbol of justice and reclamation. In that moment, as I cradled Grandma's handwritten note in trembling hands, a cold resolve began to crystallize. I realized that, while they thought they could trample over my grief without consequence, they had forgotten one vital fact. I was the rightful owner of that home. And now I vowed, Serena was in for a surprise that would force every one of them to reckon with the real cost of their callousness. The morning of Jacob's funeral arrived with a relentless drizzle that seemed to mimic my inner despair. I awoke before dawn, unable to shake the heaviness in my chest. The dark, quiet streets of our small town felt oppressive. Every step toward the funeral home weighted with the knowledge that I was alone in my sorrow. I clutched a faded photograph of Jacob, his bright smile frozen in time, and whispered promises to him that I would someday make things right. At the chapel, the atmosphere was one of muted reverence. Friends and distant relatives gathered in a solemn procession, their eyes downcast as they offered condolences in hushed tones. I remember the way the pews seemed to close in around me, as if the very structure was trying to contain the overwhelming grief. I sat there, numb and isolated, while the minister's words of hope felt like distant echoes lost in the abyss of my pain. It was during this unbearable quiet that a single, unthinkable text message shattered what little solace I had managed to cling to. My phone buzzed repeatedly, displaying a string of notifications from Serena. In one terse message, she announced that her long-awaited housewarming party had been rescheduled to coincide with today's events. I could scarcely believe it. How could she, my own sister, belittle my loss by treating my son's funeral as an inconvenience? The message was accompanied by another that made my blood run cold. Our parents, in their insidious indifference, had explicitly sided with Serena. They called Jacob's death an unfortunate yet minor setback and urged everyone to celebrate life by attending the party. Their words, so casually cruel, left me reeling with shock and betrayal. Back at the funeral, my mind spun with questions and rage. I recalled subtle hints from past family gatherings, snide remarks, pointed looks, and offhand comments that always seemed to favor Serena's antics over my struggles. The realization that I had long been treated as an afterthought stung with the clarity of a fresh wound. As I stepped out of the chapel later that day, the cold autumn air felt like a bitter reminder of how isolated I truly was. Later, in the quiet solitude of my car, I scrolled through social media. There, amidst a stream of cheerful party invitations and mundane updates, I found photos from Serena's previous parties, smiling faces, lavish decorations, and an air of entitlement that had always made me feel invisible. Every image was a painful reminder of the injustice I had suffered. Yet, it was in that moment of despair that I remembered the envelope Grandma had left for me. The delicate, handwritten note, promising that I was worthy of love and respect, had been tucked away among her personal effects. I drove home with a storm of emotions swirling in my mind. The house that Grandma had left to me had always been a symbol of my past, a place filled with memories of her gentle guidance and unconditional affection. Now, that same house was to become the stage for my retribution. With every mile, I felt the seeds of determination sprouting within me. I resolved that this day of sorrow would not be in vain. I would turn this betrayal into a catalyst for change. Over the following days, I embarked on a painful yet clarifying journey through the memories of past injustices. Every family gathering, every birthday celebration, and every holiday had been marred by a subtle yet pervasive favoritism toward Serena. I recalled a Christmas dinner when I'd spent weeks preparing a special meal, only to have my efforts dismissed with a dismissive laugh as Serena's children were showered with attention. I remembered my high school graduation, when my achievements were met with lukewarm applause, compared to the overblown celebration Serena orchestrated for her own milestones. Each memory, a painful stitch in the fabric of my life, reinforced the truth that I had always been deemed less important. Determined to confront this long-standing injustice, I began meticulously documenting every slight. I dug through old emails, text conversations, and even the notes scribbled on scraps of paper that I'd kept over the years. In one particularly gut-wrenching moment, I found a message from Mom congratulating Serena on her astounding ability to make every event a celebration, while my own achievements were mentioned in passing, if at all. Each piece of evidence was like a shard of broken glass. Small, sharp, and reflective of a truth I could no longer ignore. I also sought the perspective of those who had witnessed the dynamics from the sidelines. I called Aunt Melissa, a relative known for her candidness, and asked her about the family's history. Over a tearful conversation on a rainy afternoon, she confessed, "Danielle, I always suspected that your pain was real. I saw how your efforts were overlooked time and again. I've tried to speak up before, but it never mattered to them." Her words, raw and sincere, validated the feelings that had simmered inside me for years. I recorded her account in my journal, each word adding weight to my resolve. In the midst of my research, I also discovered something that made my blood boil even more. A series of social media posts by Serena that subtly bragged about how the family always got what they deserved. A line that, in hindsight, now revealed the full extent of their callousness. These posts were peppered with images of extravagant parties and insincere smiles, a stark contrast to the quiet sorrow I had experienced. Every new detail painted a fuller picture of a family that had systematically devalued my worth while exalting hers. That night, as I sat alone at my kitchen table with a single cup of cold coffee, I felt the full force of the betrayal. The documentation of years of neglect and favoritism was irrefutable. It was then that I resolved I would not allow my grief to be used as a pawn in Serena's selfish game. I would reclaim my dignity, and in doing so, I would force my family to face the consequences of their long-held indifference. I began to draft a plan, my pen moving furiously across the paper as I outlined each step. The house, the very symbol of my inheritance and a repository of cherished memories, would be my battleground. In the days that followed, I transformed my sorrow into a meticulously crafted plan for retribution. I realized that the very venue of Serena's callous party, my inherited home, was the perfect stage for setting things right. With the evidence of past injustices piled high and the bitter sting of betrayal still fresh, I began plotting how I would reclaim control of the narrative. Late at night, I pored over legal documents and house deeds with the help of a trusted friend, Laura, who had recently become a paralegal. Over countless cups of tea in the quiet hours of the morning, we discussed every possible angle. "Danielle," Laura said one evening, her voice firm yet compassionate, "the house is your asset. You have every right to enforce your ownership and demand respect. Let this be your turning point." Her words, simple and resolute, struck a chord deep within me. I spent several sleepless nights drafting legal notices and carefully planning every step. I mapped out a timeline that would lead to the day of the party, a day when every member of the family would be forced to confront the truth. I also reached out to a few family members who, though silent for so long, had hinted at their disapproval of the long-standing favoritism. I arranged discreet meetings in quiet cafes and phone calls that lasted deep into the night. One such conversation with my cousin Rachel, who had always been on the fringes of our family's theatrics, left me with renewed determination. "I've seen how you've been treated all your life," she confided. "It's time someone stood up for you. I'll support you in any way I can." Her promise was a beacon of hope in the dark, fueling my resolve to not only seek justice for myself, but to expose the rot at the heart of our family dynamics. Every detail of my plan was executed with precision. I began by changing the locks on the house, a symbolic act that represented taking control. I also installed discreet security cameras in key areas, not out of paranoia, but as a measure to document any further misconduct. Meanwhile, I revamped the interior of the house, rearranging furniture and setting up spaces that reflected my personality and memories of happier times with Jacob. Each new detail, a carefully placed family portrait, a shelf dedicated to Grandma's favorite books, served as a reminder that I was reclaiming what was rightfully mine. As the date of the party approached, the tension in our family reached a fever pitch. I could feel every slight and every whispered snide remark in the air. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Serena, congratulating her on what she called the best party ever. I read each message with a growing sense of disdain, knowing that every boastful word was laced with cruelty. The final piece of my strategy was simple yet effective. On the day of the party, I would publicly announce my ownership of the house and serve notice that the party, and everything it represented, was now under my control. The night before the showdown was filled with a heady mix of adrenaline and solemn reflection. I walked through the halls of my inherited home, every room echoing with memories of my son and of a past that had long been overshadowed by betrayal. I meticulously checked every detail, verifying that the security systems were online, that all legal documents were in order, and that every piece of evidence was securely backed up. I even set aside a small area in the foyer where I would display a framed copy of the deed, a constant reminder of my rightful claim. In a quiet moment on the back porch, I sat under the soft glow of a single lantern and reread Grandma's handwritten note. The faded ink spoke of love, trust, and an unwavering belief in my ability to overcome any obstacle. That simple message, delivered with a mother's tenderness, rekindled a fire in my heart. I knew that tomorrow, when my family gathered in my house for Serena's party, they would be forced to confront not only the evidence of their past wrongs, but also the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be cast aside. I spent the rest of the night drafting a final statement, a measured, heartfelt declaration of my intentions. Every sentence was carefully crafted to ensure that there would be no ambiguity. I was reclaiming my house, my legacy, and my dignity. The document was both a legal notice and a personal manifesto, a promise that justice, however delayed, was inevitable. As dawn broke over the quiet town, I felt the weight of the impending confrontation settle over me like a mantle of responsibility. I was no longer the quiet, grieving mother. I had transformed into a force of retribution, armed with truth, evidence, and a burning desire to make those who had wronged me pay the price. With the final preparations complete and every detail meticulously in place, I stepped into the new day, ready to rewrite my story. That Saturday, the house was alive with an unexpected blend of festive cheer and an undercurrent of tension. Balloons and streamers adorned the entrance, and a soft murmur of laughter and clinking glasses filled the living room as guests mingled at what was supposed to be Serena's housewarming party. Yet, as I arrived, The smiles and laughter felt like a cruel backdrop to the tragedy that had defined my recent days. I stepped through the front door with deliberate, measured steps. Every eye in the room turned to me, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed apprehension. I paused in the foyer, the cool morning air mingling with the faint scent of fresh flowers and lingering resentment. In my hand, I clutched a manila envelope containing copies of every document that proved my ownership of the house, along with a printed statement outlining the long history of disregard and favoritism that had led to this very moment. Clearing my throat, I announced, "I'd like to say a few words." The room fell into an expectant silence. My voice, though steady, was laced with the raw emotion of countless sleepless nights and unspoken heartaches. "Today you celebrate a party, but you also celebrate the disregard for a mother's grief," I began, each word echoing with the weight of my loss. "You chose to treat my son's passing as a minor inconvenience while parading your shallow priorities. And you, Serena, with your smarmy smiles and callous remarks, thought you could hide behind a facade of celebration while my pain was real and all-consuming." I paused, letting my words sink in. I then projected on a screen at the far end of the room a timeline, a montage of texts, emails, and snippets of conversation that exposed years of favoritism. "This," I declared, "is not just a party. This is a reckoning." The tension in the room was palpable as my family exchanged nervous glances. My parents' expressions shifted from feigned amusement to stark disbelief. Serena's confident smirk faltered as I continued. "I own this house, and I will no longer stand by while you trample over my grief. Today, justice takes a stand." What followed was a storm of raw emotion and bitter accusations. My sister Serena tried to brush off my words with a flippant remark. "Danielle, you're overreacting. It's just a party, not the end of the world." But I wasn't having it. I countered, "You call it a party, but to me, it's an insult, a slap in the face on the day I lost my son." The room erupted in murmurs as I laid bare the evidence of years past. Instances where I was made to feel invisible, where my love and sacrifice were overshadowed by your need for attention and privilege. Our parents attempted to interject, their voices tinged with guilt and defensiveness, but I pressed on, directing my words toward each of them. "How can you sit here and celebrate, knowing that you minimize the loss of a child? How can you call this a minor event?" I demanded, my voice cracking with the intensity of my pain. One by one, the lies began to unravel. A distant relative, previously silent, admitted that she had long suspected that Serena's celebrations always came at the expense of those who truly mattered. Her confession, delivered in a trembling voice, added another layer of truth to my argument. I watched as Serena's eyes filled with a mixture of anger and regret, her defenses crumbling with every new piece of evidence I presented. The air grew thick with tension as I continued to expose the hypocrisy that had defined our family's interactions. "You have always taken, never given," I declared. "Today, I'm taking back what is mine, not just my house, but the dignity you stole from me. No longer will my pain be overshadowed by your shallow pursuits." Each sentence was a battle cry, each word a testament to the years of silent suffering that had finally reached its boiling point. The room trembled with the force of our collective emotions, and for a moment, it felt as though the very walls of the house were bearing witness to the truth. As the verbal onslaught reached its peak, I knew that words alone would not suffice to restore the balance. With the evidence laid out before everyone, I made my final, decisive move. "Effective immediately," I announced, "I'm serving formal notice. This house, which you thought was your stage for celebration, is now under my control. You have until the end of today to pack your belongings and leave. There will be no further indulgence of your callousness." I walked over to a table in the foyer, where I had placed copies of legal documents, including a notarized statement confirming my ownership. My voice was steady as I handed these papers out, one by one, to those in attendance. I could see the shock in Mom's eyes as she fumbled for words. Serena's confident facade crumbled entirely, replaced by an expression of stunned disbelief. Even our parents, caught in their web of denial, were forced to confront the reality of my declaration. The room descended into chaos. Guests began to murmur and shift uncomfortably. Some attempted to protest, while others simply stared, unable to process the turn of events. I moved through the crowd with measured determination, each step a resounding affirmation of my newfound power. "This isn't just about a party," I said softly, but with unyielding finality. "It's about reclaiming my life and honoring the memory of my son. I will not allow you to continue devaluing what I hold dear." In that moment, as I observed the stunned silence and the hurried, disorganized scramble for belongings, I felt a surge of liberation that washed over every fiber of my being. The tables had turned completely. No longer was I the silent mourner, the overlooked victim. I was the one in control, and the consequences of their actions would reverberate far beyond this single day. The aftermath of the confrontation rippled through our family like a shockwave. As the guests filtered out of the house, their murmurs of disbelief and regret mingled with the distant sound of a car engine revving outside. I could see my parents retreat into a corner, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and helplessness, while Serena remained rooted in place, her eyes wide and uncomprehending. The final blow came when one of the older relatives, who had long remained silent, softly admitted, "I never thought you had it in you, Danielle. But maybe this is what you needed to finally be seen." Outside, the local news had caught wind of the dramatic turn of events, and by evening, a small crew was on the scene, capturing the surreal tableau of my family's collapse. The story exploded on social media, a viral account of a daughter reclaiming her inheritance, and with it, her dignity. Strangers from across the country reached out with messages of support and admiration, their words affirming that sometimes, standing up for yourself is the only way to truly heal. In the final moments of that day, I stood alone in the now quiet foyer of the house, the echoes of the confrontation still ringing in my ears. I looked around at the remnants of what had once been a symbol of our family's shared history, a house that, until that moment, had been the stage for Serena's self-indulgence and our parents' craven complicity. Now it was mine entirely, a fortress of my own making. The silence was heavy, filled with both the pain of loss and the promise of a new beginning. I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but in that moment, I felt the steady, unwavering pulse of justice. In the days that followed, I retreated to the sanctuary of my newly reclaimed home, a place that now bore the weight of both my sorrow and my triumph. The once chaotic halls were quiet, filled only with the soft hum of my determination. I spent long hours in solitude, rearranging the furniture, cleaning every room, until the memories of that fateful day seemed to recede like a tide. Every change I made was a deliberate act of healing, a declaration that the pain of betrayal would no longer define my future. I reconnected with those who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. Close friends and supportive relatives gathered around me, their gentle reassurances and heartfelt messages offering a balm for my wounded spirit. Over steaming cups of coffee and late-night conversations, I began to see the possibilities that lay ahead. The house, once a battleground of broken promises, gradually transformed into a canvas for my rebirth. I painted the walls with soft, calming colors, replaced old, worn-out furniture with pieces that spoke of my resilience, and created a small memorial corner in honor of Jacob, complete with photos, his favorite books, and mementos that celebrated the light he had brought into my life. Each day, as the sun rose over the quiet street, I felt a sense of renewal. I started to document my journey on a blog, sharing my story of betrayal, retribution, and healing with a community of kindred spirits. The outpouring of support from strangers and survivors alike reaffirmed that I was not alone, that there was strength in vulnerability and power in reclaiming one's narrative. With time, the wounds began to heal, and a new chapter of my life unfolded. I found myself drawn to creative pursuits that had once been sidelined by the weight of family drama. I enrolled in a course on interior design, channeling my newfound energy into transforming the house into a home that reflected my spirit. Every new project, every creative endeavor, was a step toward rediscovering who I was, beyond the confines of past betrayals. I also nurtured the relationships that mattered most. I began spending more time with friends who had always celebrated my resilience, and I even reached out to family members who had quietly opposed the status quo. Over time, some of those old bonds started to mend, though the scars of the past remained as bittersweet reminders. I learned to set clear boundaries and to trust my instincts, knowing that true family was built on respect and genuine care, not on the shifting sands of favoritism and neglect. Every evening, as I sat by the window of my renovated home, I allowed myself a quiet moment of reflection. I thought back to the pain of that fateful day, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the fierce determination that had driven me to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I realized that while the scars might never completely fade, they had become symbols of my strength, a testament to the fact that I had not been defeated by the darkness. I began to plan for a future that was as expansive as my dreams. I applied for further studies, determined to use my experiences to fuel a career that would help others navigate the murky waters of family dysfunction and injustice. I even started drafting a business plan for a community center that would offer support to those who had been marginalized by similar betrayals. Every aspiration was a seed of hope, and with each step I took, I felt more empowered to shape a future that was entirely my own. Now, as I sit here on a cool autumn evening, the soft glow of the setting sun filtering through the large windows of my home, I look back on the turbulent path that brought me here with a sense of quiet pride. The journey, from the devastating loss of my son, through the searing betrayal by my own family, to the triumphant reclamation of my home, has reshaped me. I am no longer the grieving, overlooked daughter. I am a woman who has learned that true strength is forged in the fires of adversity. I know that the road ahead will still hold challenges. The wounds of betrayal may never fully vanish, and there will be moments when the echoes of past injustice threaten to overwhelm me. But I also know that each scar is a badge of honor, a reminder that I have the courage to stand up, to speak out, and to demand the respect I deserve. My story is far from over. It is an ongoing narrative of resilience, of finding beauty in brokenness, and of turning pain into power. I invite anyone who has ever felt marginalized, dismissed, or betrayed to know that there is always a way forward. There is always hope in the quiet moments of self-reflection, and there is strength in reclaiming your narrative. As I close this chapter and open the door to new possibilities, I do so with gratitude for every lesson learned and every challenge overcome. I step into tomorrow with a heart full of determination and a spirit unbroken by the past. The house I now call my own is not just a building. It is a testament to the journey of healing and empowerment that continues to unfold with every new day. I know that life will continue to surprise me, sometimes with moments of joy, sometimes with echoes of past pain. But I also know that I have the power to shape my destiny. With every sunrise, I am reminded that while the past can haunt us, it does not have to define us. I am free to love, to grow, and to build a future that is as vibrant and resilient as the person I have become. So here I stand at the threshold of a new beginning, ready to embrace whatever comes next. The story of my pain and my triumph will always be a part of me, but it is not the entirety of who I am. I am a daughter, a mother, a survivor, and a fighter. And as the night falls and the stars emerge, I smile softly, knowing that the best is yet to come.